I live not far from Asheville, North Carolina, a city made famous, perhaps infamous, by Thomas Wolfe's novel You Can't Go Home Again. The story is a thinly veiled biography, Wolfe grew up in Asheville, about a successful writer who returns to his hometown made famous in his novels, only to discover that the town he thought he knew had changed. That is, I think, a fitting metaphor for being Christian in the 21st century. A generation ago, being Christian looked very different than it does today. My family always ate at home on Sundays, not because we preferred it that way, but because all the restaurants were closed on Sunday. It was, after all, the Lord's Day. We lived in a decidedly Christian town. That was true in many places in America, perhaps where you lived also. But in the late 20th century, things began to change. Christianity slowly relinquished its majority status in favor of a more pluralistic and secular society. We were moving from a modern zeitgeist to a postmodern one, and the change had decided and dramatic effects on the practice of the Christian life. Now, 2 decades into the 21st century, that change is pretty much complete. Today, we live out our faith in a culture that is decidedly postmodern, pluralistic, relativistic, post-biblical, post-Christian, consumerist, and because of the internet, increasingly digital and virtual. Christianity is now no longer the only option. We Christians must make our case in a competitive marketplace of ideas. As Wolfe reminded us, we had better get used to it. There is no going home again. I am reminded of Titus's response to Paul's leaving him on the island of Crete to continue the work of ministry while Paul went on to sow the gospel in other fields. Later, with Paul in prison, facing the axemen, Titus had the temerity to whine to Paul that life was hard in Crete. You don't know what it's like here, Paul. It's hard. The people here in Crete are, well, Cretans. And Paul says, yeah, I know. And then he quotes Epimenides' famous ironic paradox. All Cretans are liars, says a Cretan. And then he brings Titus up short with a rather startling statement. And that, my dear Titus, is precisely why I left you in Crete. And in Paul's admonition to Titus, I think I heard a word of God for us. If you think things are going back to the 60s and the church's heyday, when we were in charge of the culture and life was good, you're deluding yourself. There's an anti-Christian, anti-church, anti-God ethos out there, and it is moving from the margins to the mainstream. Make no mistake, there'll be no more breaks for Christianity in this kind of world. But let me say several things about it. First, as with all paradigm shifts, there is both bad news and good. For example, postmodernism is not all bad news for the church. While, to be sure, it has brought with it the pluralism and relativism that makes it harder to make our case in the world, it has also dethroned the hegemony of 20th century rationalism that was inhospitable to and even derisive of the whole idea of faith. Moreover, postmodernism gives credence to and even priority to the value of narrative and story in a way modernity never could. And that is good news for the good news, because the Bible's message unfolds in a grand narrative or story, if you will. This means that postmodern people are more predisposed to the message of the Bible than moderns ever could be. Second, the 21st century digital revolution has brought challenges, to be sure, but it has also brought opportunities. You can now, right from your living room, engage the world with the gospel in a way you never could before. Third, there is something essentially Christian about being an enclave of one culture in the midst of another, often alien, hostile culture. It is the very nature of the church to be in the world while not being of it. And finally, as Paul reminded Titus, for this cause left I thee in Crete. No, you can't go home again, but then again, this was never home to begin with. It is a major theme in the writings of C.S. Lewis. Sehnsucht, he calls it. It's a German word, and it means yearning or longing for home. The places we thought the object of our desire all betray us in the end, he writes, for they were not the thing itself. They were merely the scent of a flower we have not yet found, the echo of a tune we have not yet heard, news from a country we have not yet visited. No matter how much we wanted them to be, they never were what we really sought, home. And so welcome to the 21st century. With all the challenges and opportunities, this is our home away from home. And while we are here, there is much work to do. Take care. God bless.